Not yet. Hang on. Just bear with it.
It's a stressful job, Chris.
There we go.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope that this is working. We're in Chris's fantastic technological hands. I'm amazed his technological skill hasn't burnt out after doing so much editing. So thanks for joining us anyway. This is a historic moment in Bradford Festival Choral Society's long history. Our first ever online pre-concert talk. Normally my pre-concert talks aren't recorded for posterity, so I'm feeling the pressure a little bit. So it's great to be joined, obviously, with Chris, our assistant musical director, and the very illustrious and brilliant soprano Peyee, who joins us in the Nelson Mass, and Ben Crick, the artistic director of Skipton Camerata, who's worked very hard with us for producing the orchestral music for our concert this evening. So I'm thinking, after spending what feels like editing something like Lord of the Rings rather than a 38-minute mass, that I'm still not tired of Nelson Mass at all. I don't think I ever tire of this music. It's wonderful. I first played it as a teenager for a choral society, and I loved it then, and I still do. So I'm going to hand over to Peyee, first of all, for your favourite moments. I mean, you've got an amazing part to sing and a part to play in it anyway. What do you love about it?
Um, Basically everything. The really, I guess I have the most fun in the really fast forward parts. That it was a bit of a challenge to record though, because the click track was very strict, and in order to not make too much of a mess of things and make your job or Chris's job too difficult, it took quite a lot of takes to get it right, but it was worth it.
It totally is, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing. The Kyrie is like the kind of queen of a night wandering into mass by mistake, isn't it? I mean, it's extraordinarily virtuosic and so striking. And Ben, as an orchestral musician, would you rate this similar to Creation?
I think it's up there with the Creation. I think what's particularly impressive is the variety and what he gets out of such so minimal of means. You haven't got this massive orchestra. You've not got huge forces. You've got this string section, a couple of trumpets and a timp. And in that, we've got music that's incredibly moving. We've got music that's incredibly reflective. And then almost music of a folk idiom in this jolly fast stuff as well. And that variety of sound and that world of music in such small forces is almost uniquely impressive, I think, for this sort of period of time. I mean, as an organist, you probably have something similar.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, the classical period's a weird graveyard of organ music. There isn't very much at all.
I knew I liked it.
There are these bonkers pieces for mechanical clock by Mozart and a few little clock pieces by Haydn, but not much at all. But yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the variety, because I was looking earlier on at the Et Resurrexit, which I think just edges it for my favourite movement, and even within that one movement, the variety of texture and the way it's organised. You know, you've got so much unison choir writing, but so much variety in the scoring, which you'd think was quite difficult to get from 5 strings and a couple of trumpets and the singers. But it's so coherent, isn't it? In a way that I think, you know, Mozart masses, of course, that they're not his greatest music generally, but nothing comes close to this. I mean, there's not a note you could change to make it better.
I think you're right. And I think that's a really important point, that this is up with the pinnacle of Haydn's writing. It is the absolute top of his canon. And there's not many first-rank composers that you can say that about. But this is a genuinely great composer at the top of his game, creating church music. And it's fantastic. And there's only really him and Bach that spring to mind that do that with quite such skill.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, can you bear to listen to any more movements of it after the last couple of weeks?
Very much like you, I absolutely can. And it's interesting. I think, you know, these were like some of Haydn's late masters, and the Nelson Mass is the most popular, and it was actually one of the first sort of pieces I did at university singing, and I absolutely loved it. It's what has been really good for me enjoying it, particularly in this time, is it is just a piece filled with optimism. And I remember particularly at the start of the first lockdown last year, we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was happening, particularly in the arts as well. And we didn't have much to do as musicians. So I actually started looking at some of Haydn's keyboard works, because they are, he just knows how to write amazing melodies. And his work is just filled with this effortless optimism. And I totally felt that throughout the Nelson Mass all the time. And even spending so long fitting all the tracks together, analyzing it, and putting the videos together, it always uplifts you. Because these are some of his late works, there is just this wonderful effortlessness that is really comforting to experience. And it just being able to revisit it just reminded me of how amazing it is, how fantastic a piece of work it is.
It is, isn't it? It's so natural. You can't see the sort of incredible craft and skill that's beneath. I mean, obviously, there's a big dose of genius thrown in, and I wonder. I don't know, Peyee. Do you think Haydn sort of a bit weirdly underrated still in the great canon of composers? Mozart and Bach are the kind of go-tos, but Haydn, I mean, is amazing. What do you think?
I think, I played quite a lot of Haydn when I was in youth orchestra, but whether or not I played it well, that's another thing. And I think perhaps that's the thing that's kind of difficult about Haydn, because it's like, they say that if you can do Mozart well, you can do anything well, because there's no room to hide, except I think that goes even further for Haydn. There's really no room to hide in Haydn. The structures are so clear, the forms are so clear within the movements that it really shows when you don't have a very clear idea of what the gesture is supposed to be or the pacing of the line is supposed to be. So at least as a performer, I feel like you really have to imbue each gesture as simple or as clear. It's not really simple, but as clear as a gesture is, you have to give it, all the attention that you possibly can and all the care that you possibly can. And then it'll really come alive. But it's also really easy to make a performance of the piece that sounds kind of, dull and, square. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard music, even though on the surface it doesn't seem like that, but it's hard music to do well. And perhaps that's why it doesn't get done as often as, I don't know, Beethoven or Mahler. I mean, they have their own difficulties, but there are more colors to play with. And in Haydn, you really have to, I don't know, dig deep into your toolbox and have good craft to do it well.
How did you find sort of the singing into the phone thing?
Chris saved me for this, because I think I had started recording the Kyrie, and then I don't remember what was the next movement we did, like maybe the Gloria or something. And of course I tried to listen back to it to check it, because I do a couple of takes to check it and make sure I haven't fudged a note wrong or something. And then I think I messaged Chris, like it was quite late at night or something. I was like, Chris, this is awful. I feel terrible. And Chris was like, why are you listening to yourself? Don't do that. Just sing it and just send it to us. And then, but Chris also made like a mock-up of like the SATB version, so I could like listen to it and feel a bit better, like I was making music. But it's hard. It's really hard.
So Peyee not only did the soprano solos to people watching, but she actually helped us put the guide tracks together to help the choir sing along to. And those are two completely different skills. Peyee, you suddenly had to switch. As a soloist, you had to try and be expressive within the click tracks, as you were saying, and sing to a camera, smartphone, and everything. But for the guide tracks, which is just what you were talking about, we really needed parts that were as clear as possible, to really help guide the choir along. And that, in a way, is possibly a tougher skill to do, because, again, you're just being reminded this is the problem we have at the moment. Like, everything is being recorded, we can listen back too easily. It sounds completely different another time we listen. It requires a lot of, tough discipline to just, record it sort of analyze it inside your head and then move on and let it go. But you really did do a fantastic job sort of helping us out.
But
And
but is there
that's demonstrated through the voices for the entries that we got in the choir.
Is that the great challenge of doing it this way? There's so much. Get a load of musicians in a room, and there's so much that will be unspoken that will be done. If you've got a string section and they're all playing quavers, bum, 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 get them in the room and those quavers will be the same length. Nobody will discuss it. Nobody will say anything or might correct a few things, but they will naturally do that. When you're doing it in your bedroom, there's got to be a decision made. There's got to be an email going wrong. Right, they're going to be quite long, quite short, separated. So all that sort of like collaborative and collective music making that we all do on a daily basis before this apocalypse suddenly has to be conscious and vocalized. And I know for the players that's probably the hardest bit, to be honest. I'm sure. As a choir master, Tom, did you find that similar discussions had to be had between singers?
I think it's been fascinating. I mean, choir members watching might completely disagree. I'm sure they'll put in the chat if they do. I mean, it's that consciousness of the element, certainly for those of us who are making music every day, that is particularly tiring, I think. Having to articulate, as you said, what goes unspoken and is just intuitive or from years of practice normally. I think one fascinating thing about it is that if you consider, how particularly an amateur choir or particularly, youth choirs that I work with a lot are generally so much more than the sum of their parts, and that's definitely a compliment rather than a damning with faint praise, because it enables people who are not making music every day, and singing is wonderful for that, isn't it? You can just do it and everyone can sing, different qualities of course, but everyone can do it. It's a really innate way of accessing music, but there must be so many people who the thought of not only recording the audio but recording your face at the same time. I mean, I know I've done loads of YouTube stuff for work, having never ever done anything like this before, and it is horrific, watching yourself constantly to check that stuff is okay. Even the sort of just the safety checking to make sure you've not put any outtakes in by mistake, which is remarkably easy to do, I've discovered. But I think what's so impressive is actually listening to the quality, and Chris will say the same, I'm sure, the quality of the individual choir singing. And I think, or I hope, a lot of people who come out of it, and I've really noticed this with the children's choirs that have held together, feeling, people have had to dig deep for a bit of resilience and autonomy musically in a way that choir sometimes doesn't encourage. It encourages, I mean, when I have singing lessons occasionally, I'm always being berated for being lazy, because of choir. Choir makes you lazy. And I think we've seen some real development in musical skill and confidence. And certainly when the children's choirs have come back at work at Leeds Cathedral, they've sounded as good, if not slightly better than they were before musically, because I think they've done so much. They've had to be so resilient, which is amazing, really. But yeah, it is a very strange form of making music. Chris?
I mean, this has been the ultimate challenge. Bradford Festival Choral Society has done small videos. We've kind of learnt this process. This has been the toughest challenge, and we really thought, like in the fugue section, the quoniam, the credo. There's some really, really tricky, intricate contrapuntal choral writing. And we did think, is this going to be too much for the choir? And to be honest, I personally was really quite blown away, at the accuracy and the quality of the choir members, like all of them really. And I've actually told them I was, I wouldn't say it unless I didn't mean it, and I was really, really blown away. It's really endearing, and I really do agree with Tom. I think it's made people really listen to themselves and really work hard. It's an uncomfortable thing. We don't like listening to ourselves. Even you, Peyee, has said that's not a nice thing. But it's we've got to take positives out of this situation, and that's one of them.
I mean, perhaps the big question is, if this is a good thing to do, will choirs, will groups, will singing groups continue to work like this occasionally when it's not the only thing on offer? Would Peyee, would you be happy to do a similar project like this if live performance is also on offer at the time?
I mean, I guess I wouldn't say no. To me, this doesn't take the place of live performance. That's another complete different thing. But this is, for me, the experience was something different because I, instead of kind of, giving it my all during like one performance, I could really take my time and sculpt it and try to do a couple of takes that actually turned into something that I thought is the best that I could do with what I had. And it was more like, I don't know, like making an object rather than this transient, joyful experience, which is what a live performance is. That's what makes live performance so special, because you have to be there at that time, and after it's over, it's just disappeared. But this is more like, everyone coming together and building a house or making a meal or something. It's something more like that. There's something more tangible to it. So I wouldn't say no, but it's definitely a lot of hard work. It's really hard work. And mentally, it's also hard sometimes to be kind to myself when I'm recording. I think that was the thing that was the hardest during all of this is, as Chris said, listening back to myself and making sure that things are good and good enough, but, doing it in a way that makes me do it better, but also not, flagellating myself over it. So in some ways it has taught me patience and a bit of kindness towards myself. I would continue doing it. But in no way would this take the place of live rehearsal and live performance for me. No way.
Tom, I just wonder, do you think you can, like, when people watch this video, they're just going to see a video, 40 minutes of the whole mass, but maybe you could just break down slightly, like, all the elements. Like, this is a big project. You just give people an idea, maybe.
Yeah. We've only got a few minutes, but it is interesting, isn't it? Because actually before March last year, although it's weird, this sort of virtual choir was a thing. People did it, particularly in the States, and there's some big kind of international collaborations. Like Eric Whittaker did a few projects like this, it certainly brings singers together. Chris and I were chatting earlier on about this, and we worked out it's a sum we should have done before embarking on the project rather than at this stage when we've been irreparably damaged by it. But we've processed, I think, something in the region of 600 individual videos to put this together. So when you think the videos arrive, and something that had never occurred to me was actually how difficult it is to manage and organise that amount of data without accidentally deleting half of it. So once we've got past that hurdle,
I don't know how my computer coped. I don't know how I found storage for it all. I really did.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, I had an awful moment on Sunday trying to export my first sort of a full video, and it just switched off and wouldn't switch back on again until the morning. And I thought at that point, are we going to have to cancel this? But yeah, so Chris and I processed all the videos, and the way we did it for this was we then extracted the audio from the videos, put that into a digital audio editor, and then edited that down. So you've got your kind of click track with Peyee, with the other singers singing on, and it can all be aligned nicely. And of course, as Ben was saying, because people are doing it individually, some of the detail that's intuitive, even in a big amateur choral society, where a lot of the consonants will just be together because of momentum, you find that stuff is a lot kind of messier than it would be ordinarily. So there's quite a lot of editing of that detail. And of course, people's equipment varies hugely. So background noise, volume of recording, offstage noise, animals, and so on, partners sometimes. We had one great video of somebody else talking all the way through it at one point. That was for a different project, but yeah. So we did all that, and then Ben sent the click tracks off to the band. He processed all the players' audio, and then comes to sort of putting it all together. And again, trying to process that amount of data, certainly my computer couldn't cope with it. So for the big set pieces and the movements I've done, I had to do a quarter of a screen at a time and then export that and then glue it all together finally. And then you're making sure. I had a horrific moment this morning when I was checking a final bit and I realised that Chris's instructions at the end of the audio were still on the audio. So, my children learned some new words, I think, at that point. But
the amount of people, though, have said they've really enjoyed those introductions and outros. I think I've got a potential career in audiobook reading.
I found them quite soothing, so.
For the ones we've done at work with the children's choirs, they can all recite them off by heart. They're there saying, "Thank you for taking part in this recording. The track is about to begin." One thing I found, Chris, and I don't know, Ben, and maybe even Peyee from doing the recording, is a benefit for me from doing this is it's kept my ears working. I haven't stood in front of musicians. I mean, I'm lucky that at work, we've got some of the choirs back, but on the whole, I've not been listening to stuff, critically. So actually having to really absorb yourself in the sound world and think about pitch, think about blend, albeit in a very odd way, has really helped, I think, in coming back to rehearsal in live, that I don't feel as rusty as I might have done. How have you found it, Ben?
I absolutely agree. But what's interesting is if there was a bit that I was putting together, I didn't have the score in front of me. And it's interesting how you hear things when you're not looking at the score. And there was a bit which should have been bam, 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 quavers together, but they'd got out. And what I was getting was ba-dam, ba-dam, ba-dam. And I'd assumed it was written semiquaver, dot, semiquaver, semiquaver, dot, semi. So lined it up like that. It's completely wrong. And that moment of oral perception, when you see the score, no, this is what you want. Actually, you got back to me and said this bit should be together. All right, shift that on. So it does train your ears, but you can also, unless you're absolutely on top of what it's meant to be, it reminds me of the conductor that we learn score, we learn music so we know what it should be, and then we can process what it actually is. And without that groundwork before, it was really tricky to do. But fortunately, I had you to tell me it were wrong, so we're all right.
Absolutely. So we're going to have to wrap up in a minute or so. So in a sentence, what do you want to happen in the next year, all three of you, for music, for what we're doing? Ben, you can go first.
I'll go first. Right. I'd like a little bit of what it was before. As simple as that. I'd quite like what it was before, please. That'd do me.
Chris?
Yeah, I absolutely want live music back. Because I've been lucky enough to be doing a bit like you, and it is just, it just reminds you how amazing it is, and I'm sure all the singers do. What I'd really like, though, is I'd kind of like it to be a bit more locally based. I'd like us to really, really start investing and thinking about the area and reaching out to a much closer community, really think green and not that traveling as much, and that would be really good for me.
Cool. Peyee?
Yeah, all of what they said, basically. I miss making music with people, so I'm looking forward to getting into spaces with friends and making some noise again. I really miss that. My body misses that, my heart misses that. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. No, I completely agree, and I think it's that sort of visceral nature of making music that is just. I mean, it's a first world problem in lots of ways, isn't it? But to lose that has been really hard, and I think it's made me really conscious of how fragile lots of people's access to the arts is. And focus our minds on improving that and equality of access to the sort of wonder and joy of classical music. It shouldn't just be a sort of the club that could access it, pandemic or not. It's got to be focused on those who wouldn't, who have lost out during this, hugely, and musicians, of course, as well. So anyway, thank you all so much for taking the time, volunteering to come and have a chat. Thanks to our viewers for watching. I hope it was interesting. I've got no idea how this has come across at all. The concert, the premiere, is on a different video, so don't stay and watch this because it will be switched off in a sec. You'll have to go over to the channel page and it will be there. Don't be put off by the hideous YouTube countdown music. There's nothing that we can do about that, unfortunately. So if you've not experienced before, you can compare that with the Nelson Mass. So I hope you really enjoy it. Do check out my colleagues' sort of amazing work that's readily available on YouTube as well. And we'll pop some links to various projects they've all been doing in the live text chat on the concert page as well. So thanks very much. Thanks, Peyee. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Chris.